No one wants to really admit that their workplace culture is crappy or that their processes aren't really up to par or up to standard or even delivering the level of quality that they claim, and they meaning leadership, that they claim that it is delivering. Nobody wants to talk about those things. Nobody wants to say that.
Right.
And in today's world where everyone is super sensitive on every single thing, it makes it challenging to actually get to the root cause of a problem because there's always one person who's offended by something that was said.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't. And we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh Rephun. And if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. Today's guest on Truth Tastes Funny doesn't just talk about leadership. She gets under the hood and takes a look at how it actually works. Stephany Poe is an organizational alignment strategist. She's founder of Poe Coaching and Consulting, and she helps leaders see what's really happening inside of their organizations, not the surface level stuff, the real intersection of culture, communication, and performance where things either click or quietly fall apart. With a sharp multi-generational lens, Stephany unpacks how differing expectations, lived experiences, and communication styles shape decision making, leadership effectiveness, and daily operations. And when alignment slips, she calls it straight. And you feel it in morale, you feel it in turnover, productivity, and trust. And her work brings about clarity to what leaders know is off, but they can't quite name it. And she challenges them to communicate with intention. She examines whether their systems truly support their people and and help make decisions that strengthen both performance and sustainability. And she's got a master's in legal studies from ASU's Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. So she brings a grounded understanding of policy, governance, and organizational risk into every conversation. And because she helps leaders get aligned for real, I thought it would be very interesting to have this conversation about what leaders go through. How do they stay aligned in a chaotic world? So, welcome, Stephany, to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can have a copy of that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm always happy to give my guests a copy of the intro, and I'm honored when they like it. But you know what goes on inside organizations and what and how it is handled by the people in charge, obviously has a ripple effect. Tell us a little bit about the world that you swim in.
Ooh, so the world that I swim in is a bit of chaos, actually, because no one wants to really admit that their workplace culture is crappy or that their processes aren't really up to par or up to standard or even delivering the level of quality that they claim, and they meaning leadership, that they claim that it is delivering. Nobody wants to talk about those things. Nobody wants to say that.
Right.
And in today's world where everyone is super sensitive on every single thing, it makes it challenging to actually get to the root cause of a problem because there's always one person who's offended by something that was said and it wasn't personal. It's really about the process. But when the offense happens, the focus is now changed to that offense and where did policy break and how can we get around this as a whole, as a company. Meanwhile, the real issue is no longer being talked about. It's
Yeah.
the process itself, the conveyor belts. I mean, go back to Ford when they're putting together a car and all the parts that's needed. There's the assembly line. Well, if
Yeah.
you put that in a visual, we have the assembly line and we're huddled around this conveyor belt to pick out the parts, but someone accidentally dropped the part on a person's foot. Now the person is aching up and down because their foot's on fire from pain, and now they're offended personally. The shift, the focus is no longer on the conveyor belt, it's on the person now. You see what I'm saying in terms
Right.
of visual?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is the world that I swim in terms of organizational misalignment. I help leaders get back to that conveyor belt. Let's get the objects back on the conveyor belt and let's really get to the problem. Not saying we want to address what the issue is personally, but I want to refocus and reshift where the actual focus should be, which is on the process and not the people.
Yeah. And I love that because um that is so real and so much what happens. And
Mm-hmm,
yet it's almost like in life, whether it's in business or relationships or communications, certainly in a world like today's where we're hyper connected, which means we have so many touch points with one another. There's so many opportunities for people to get offended or to immediately tense up when something goes wrong, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
an organizational person might say, well, let's look at the thing in the system where the thing went wrong. But you can't just go there.
No.
You have to realign. It's like chiropractic, right? What do you think is the key trigger for misalignment in an organization?
One, I'd say pattern and habit. Because at some point in time of an organization's founding and growing, they were doing great. And then COVID happened. We all remember how great COVID was. Um, I think it really showed that there is a real need for work-life balance. I know there are many individuals out there who don't like the term, and I get it. I mean, to each its own. But it is a real thing. And people do need to sit for a second and actually put some care back into their self in order to care about the work that they are doing when they show up for an organization. If they
Yeah,
don't, then how in the world do you expect for them to care about your customers, i.e., your money? So
yeah,
I think that it's important when it came to COVID that it really showed that, you know what, there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's what my grandmother would say in the South because I am from Mississippi. Um, and then when COVID ended, post COVID, I think organizational leaders didn't really figure out how to come back to a workplace that made sense for them because COVID opened up so many different possibilities. We can now work from home as a frontline individual. We can now work from home as a mid-level leader. I don't have to sit at a C-suite or be a vice president to do the work that I need to do. I can now do it at home. I don't have to be in the office to do it. And I can do it at such an efficient rate or speed that it's okay. And I can sit in my boxers or shorts and, pajamas and do it. I'm okay
yeah,
with that. But I know that there are many organizational leaders who would want the people back in the office and say, hey, we need that culture. But here's the thing about workplace culture that I think people forgot is that workplace culture really is your organization's mission statement. That's your workplace culture. That's your compass. And so when we pull in other things like social norms or social reactions and responses, we're mixing that into the workplace culture, which is the company mission statement. And we're forgetting that we do actually have a culture. It's the mission statement. But we've gotten away from that because of everything that's happening socially, and I understand it because for the first time in our lives, in terms of work, social is now entering the workplace. And
yeah,
no one, I don't think, really realized the impact or the level that the internet would have in terms of access, how much access people would have to information and the impact of that access. I don't think people really calculated that, which is why social is able to enter into the workplace now at such a rapid speed because all it takes is one photo, one video, and boom, it's on social media. And now that's your workplace culture.
Now, how did you get to be so attuned to the nuances of relationships, communication, and all of this?
I have an eclectic background. I have an eclectic background. I am fortunate because I grew up in the South. So I was raised by my grandmother, and I credit my grandmother a lot for a lot of the way that I think and see things in terms of a moral compass. But more importantly, I also moved down the West Coast. So I got a real taste at, the city life and what that looks like. Because those are two total different cultures.
Yeah.
It's a culture shock. I mean, the trees are totally different. They still kind of get me every once in a blue moon. But having that eclectic background, I was able to work in government. I was able to work in private sector and debt consolidation, tech, education, law. I got a chance to even go before Congress at one point. I took the experiences of people around me who were older than me when I was in my early 20s to understand why they see the way they see things, understand why they think the way they think. I was always fascinated with the thought process of people. And even more so, I'm fascinated with them trying to convince me to maybe get on their side or convince me that their way of thinking is right. And I'll let them say it all the way out, even though my answer will be no. I'm still fascinated at the level that people will go to try to convince me that I should side with their perspective, even though I know I'm going to say no. And so
That, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I as a woman, I love to understand people. I operate from a place of integrity and a place of clarity. And I don't care to be right in the moment. I don't need to win a moment. I don't care to be right. I rather understand you more so than be right. Because if I can understand you, then I can see where you're going and then I can help get us there safely. Or I can help get us there in the manner you choose, but you can't be upset with the consequences because you are 100% aware of the choice that you are making. And being a millennial, I've been able to grow up in such a world that things changed at the paces that it did. So I was around when there were, of course, the internet and how it exploded. And I remember MySpace. I remember how internet started with the social media stuff. And I've never really been a social media person, but of course I'm in it. But I have friends that did and that were and that still are. So I was able to adapt to their world and to understand how they see things on the internet and how they use it and how it helps them or it harms them. And more so, I stick to my core. I mean, I want to treat people how I want to be treated. I think that's still in style. And so
Yeah.
I just like to be the example of integrity and honesty. And sometimes it hurts, and that's okay. But it's a good pain, and I can still look at myself in the mirror when I get up every morning.
Yeah, and that sense of self to bring that to the conversation where, you don't need this. I also grew up with this sense of I don't need to be right. I I and my sisters, I have two older sisters. I think we all grew up wanting to be heard,
Mhm.
but not having to be right. Now
Yeah.
that doesn't, account for temperament. Sometimes sometimes being not being right is not a happy place to be. And, there's all of that. And when you're growing up in a household and the parents are trying to kind of manage the personalities and all of that, it doesn't have to necessarily be about who's right. But my parents would always listen. And I think that's where I certainly learned there you don't get hurt by listening. You don't get hurt by hearing people out.
Yeah.
And to your point, Stephany, you may have a real conviction about something and not change your opinion, but you can still have learned something about that person from letting them talk. I learned in business as a young man, I would watch the more mature and experienced business people, and I would notice that the smartest ones listened.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, there were people who were very successful, but who would just talk over you. They didn't want to hear your opinion at all.
Mhm.
It was about them, and they wanted you to hear them. And they would ask you questions, but the answer their thoughts would come before the answer really came out of you, you know. Um,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but this explains why you have this kind of keen awareness of how organizations work, because that's where you have all these moving pieces. Now, for you, um, at what point did you start the consulting firm? And were you independent always professionally, or were you working inside an organization?
So oddly enough, I was actually working in construction. Now I didn't
Oh,
build it because I always make the joke my hair and nails couldn't take it. I didn't build it, but I had to manage the communication of that entire monster of a project. I think it was like a $2.7 million project. There were 14 different construction crews on this project. There was one in particular that I represented, and they had 14 other subcontractors, and I had to work with all of those guys to
wow, yeah.
understand what it is that they're doing. I needed to know which lanes are going to close. I needed to know which access to the buildings or businesses or residential areas that they were going to shut off for X amount of days. I had to work with the city judges. I had to work with Right Away, the city of Phoenix. I had to work with everyone you could think of. Mind you, government, quasi government, private businesses, and residences, they all do not play well in the sandbox together at all.
Yeah.
So I had to translate construction workers' conversation into executive conversation. I had to translate all of that and then translate it back down so they would understand. And so, being on that project, what people didn't know is that I had a mentor in my 20s who was an intermescent fireproofing consultant. Basically, he fireproofed steel and he built
Okay.
a lot of the East Coast. So I learned from him actually how to read blueprints, how to understand a commercial building, how to understand what it is that I'm looking at to be built. I also had another mentor who made furniture, custom furniture by hand. So I understood how the inner workings of a house needs to look if you're going to build something and have it in house. And then I had another mentor who comes from a line of stonemasons. So his entire family built homes all over Pennsylvania. And they also came out west and they built homes all over the valley. So I have the inner workings of understanding how to build a building or a home from the ground up. I know exactly what I'm looking at when I'm walking on a construction site, no matter if it's commercial or residential. So I was actually in that lane before I came over into consulting because I wanted to understand problems. I wanted to understand how something is built and stuff like that just fascinated me. I wasn't happy I had to trade out my heels and skirt for boots and jeans, but I got the work done. But I was actually in that, and the same issues continued to populate there, and that was communication. It was also from the top, tone isn't set clearly or set differently, and when it's trickled down, no one hears that tune. They hear a different beat, or it's completely silent. There's
Yeah.
also inner workings, relationships, dynamic between the younger generation, the older generation, experienced individuals, non experienced individuals. The same issues were happening that I've seen across other industries. And prior to that, working in government, I was actually a part of a team where we learned about Lean Six Sigma. And a lot of that is my background. And I actually helped transform about 5,000 mindsets from one way of doing business to another way of doing business in government, which is not easy to do.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
had that plus construction and all the other experiences that I've had. Um, that is what actually helped drive me over into working into my own business because I wanted to help the newer generation into this workforce understand that one, you do need to leave your crap at the door. I get it, but we still have things we gotta get done. We gotta do work.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's okay to be loyal to an organization for more than 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's okay. It's not a big deal. And three, you need to have a plan for yourself, not just as an employee, and it really doesn't matter the level, but you need to have a plan for yourself as an individual because your manager isn't or shouldn't be the only person that has an investment in your development as a professional. And I think that is something that we've gotten away from. And especially post COVID, I don't think many organizations have figured out how to deal with that. I think they've really struggled with answering today's workforce, young, new, and old, on how to move forward in this business world.
Now let me ask you this because this is an area that I'm interested in as well, which is when you zoom out and I'm listening to you speak, and all of a sudden I feel like we're zooming out now from, the what you do and what your expertise is and where you learned it to what is the global thought about this stuff. This isn't just about, you know, going in and helping organizations and leaders. It's really the thought process that we as a society
Mm-hmm.
have about working relationships. So, this is a little bit to me, a little meta, right? Because it's like, you start out with, I have a business, these are the offerings, this is what I do, and this is what drives me. And then but, there's something bigger to teach here.
Yes.
There's there's some lessons that people who are not just your clients can
Mm-hmm.
learn. How are you carrying some of that stuff out there, or are you carrying some of these bigger messages, bigger learnings out there?
Well, I try not to be honest with you. I
Yeah.
tried not to for a long time, but with all of the jobs that I've ever held, even into owning my own business, I've always kept in contact with my previous coworkers and people that worked underneath me. They've always stayed in contact with me some way, shape, or form. They've even moved out of state. They're in other businesses and other industries, and they still come to me and ask me for my opinion on things. Personally, I'm extremely spiritual. So I do look at the stars and I look at the numbers. But I also still say, my prayers at night and my thank yous as well, because I'm very grateful for the things that I have and the things that I learned. But I think in terms of the working relationship, um, being this age helps a lot because again, growing up in Mississippi and having that old school mentality teach me some things. And I grew up on a farm. So I grew up deep in the country, far
Wow.
away
Yeah.
from city and understanding what that even looks like. I've already had responsibilities by the time I was 10 or 11 before it was really something to say, oh my gosh, this is a big responsibility to me. It was like another chore. It's something I got to do. We got to
Yeah.
get it done. And so now being in this particular space, I understand that there's a lot mentally with people, emotionally with people. But more importantly, I had to do the work myself as a person. I had to understand my own flaws. And, when you have a mentor in your life, they really do if you have a really good one, they really do a good job at helping you see your own behavior patterns.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have people around you who's going to tell you when you mess up, who's going to say, hey,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a really good idea, but the choice is yours. And self accountability. I know we hear that word or, words thrown around a lot, but that's a real thing because self accountability starts with self awareness. You have to see what you're
Yeah.
doing And you have to, and it shows up in more than one way. It shows up personally, it shows up professionally, but it shows up consistently and it turns into a pattern. And if you got the right people around you, they'll call out that pattern and you'll be able to take the responsibility or not. If you're around me, I usually do that in a subtle way at first, but then
Yeah.
it's a little tougher afterwards if it continues to happen because I 2 or 3 times personally of telling me something you've done or I can't believe this has happened to me. At this point, especially if it's the third time, I'm going to ask you, why do you keep showing up for it? Because to me, it sounds
Yeah.
like it looks like you like it. So let's stop
Yeah.
complaining. So I come a little tough like that, but it needs to be that way because at some point you have to take responsibility for the part you play in the BS, good, bad, or indifferent. And so
Yeah.
I think with the work relationships, and yes, on the bigger scale, this does happen. Um, with social entering into our workplace, and I had to have this conversation with a leader a couple of weeks ago, actually, where I told her there's a thing in terms of work relationship versus personal relationship. You can have a work relationship without making it personal. That is still a thing. And the moment you enter in personal feelings in a work relationship, then you turn it into an HR moment. And that's the last thing HR needs to deal with. And then you have the conversation of HR is not your friend. Well, that's a known fact. HR is a function. There are friendly people within HR, but HR is a function and it follows a process. And in order to help the people who are friendly within that process, give them the right behavior patterns that's taken place that you've experienced and not how you feel personally. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the lines, we've blurred the lines.
Well, circling back now to within organizations, that's a really interesting point because separating the personal from the professional is not, we started talking about the conversation, talking about people getting offended. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the ability to separate the personal from the professional, not as though feelings don't matter, but that isn't the function. That isn't our function in the workplace. It's a factor. It's something we're human beings. We bring it into the workplace. Thank God we do, because that's what makes what we do so special to the people that we serve, to the people we work with, the people who work with us, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But keeping it in its proper place and perspective is where it gets really difficult. And I think there's a lot to for people to learn um, from your experiences and your lessons. Uh, I think you really were blessed to grow up the way you did and have this attitude coming into the professional world to step back and observe things, to listen to people, to help other people work through it. You know, I we had talked a while back, but I don't know if you mentioned to me, are you writing a book?
Yes, I am. I'm in the final editing stages of it. It's called Perfect Progression. And it actually talks about workplace issues and how it impacts people mentally, emotionally, physically, maybe even spiritually on some levels, and definitely financial. I think there's plenty of real life examples right now of how workplace culture does, in fact, impact performance. And if people are not clear on where that real place example is, go take a flight. I'll go there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited about that because I mean there are challenges with a book where uh you create Amazon, everything. Everybody wants to categorize the books into certain things, and you pick certain categories, and then people looking for certain kinds of books are going to find your book. But there are valuable universal lessons in what you're doing, and I wonder if you've given thought to how that book is going to uh, be calibrated to kind of land land with a wider audience? Because I really feel like there's a lot of wider messaging here.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. I'm definitely talking about the passive aggressive manager, the employee who shows up. She just wants to do her job. She might want to elevate a little bit, but she's going to run across workplace politics, which is actually a course I'm going to create in about a month or two in regards to workplace politics. I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well. That's an unspoken thing that happens, but it happens in terms of conversation during lunch or break.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'll be tackling later on down the road. And then also, I'm talking about the insecure supervisor because we have them. There's insecure individuals all over, and it's just annoying at some point. But yeah, there's a lot of messaging there in terms of where it's going to land. Um, I don't know in per se. I don't know specifically. I'm just happy that I'm in the final editing stages of this book.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can write it, get it out. I actually already have over 90 something pre-orders in 27 states.
Fantastic.
So
Congratulations.
thank you. This is actually the first year that I'm really actually talking more about it. When people meet me randomly at, Walmart or Target or a gas station, because believe it or not, random people just come up and talk to me and they just about anything under the sun. And
Yeah.
I've had random people cry to me just out of the blue. This actually happened to me yesterday. I had a woman, I was getting Chinese food. I'd just gotten back in
Yeah.
getting Chinese food and we just started talking about life and I told her, I said, when change happens and people are resistant to change, this is what it looks like. This is a visual representation of what it looks like when you resist change because change happens to you in two ways. It's either by choice or it's by force. And if it's by force, then you're hurt in the process because you need to remember why you had to change. So that's how change happens. And so she instantly started crying and told me her whole life story. And my 18-year-old daughter was with me and she's like, Mom, I'm like, we're gonna give her a hug and console her. And that was it. So people just randomly talk to me and I tell them about the book and they say, where can I find it? And it's on my website, poeecc.com. Get my book, they find it, they pre-order, and they're on the list.
That's fantastic. Well, that's very good news to hear because I definitely can see where that's a great audience for you. And speaking of audience, it would be wonderful if you kind of concluded this interview some with some thoughts for it's funny you mentioned that woman, with some thoughts for people who out there who are just, they're just trying to create a peaceful atmosphere amongst one another, and this applies in the workplace, outside the workplace, family, everything, because I think that it all is about a disposition that you might have. But what would be a closing thought for people out there?
Well, the one thing that comes to mind, and I said this before, if you want a drastic change, then it requires for you to make drastic decisions. So I would say that if you want a drastic change, make a drastic decision.
I like that. I like that very much. Well, Stephany Poe, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope you'll come back when the book is out and maybe talk a little bit about the book. And thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.